Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the preview to the 10 best recordings of Paul Paray, that marvelous French conductor who lived from 1886 to 1979, which is pretty good. He was 93 when he passed away. And he was one of the generation of great dictator conductors, that grew up in the late 1880s, with like Kusevitsky and Toscanini. He was actually 20 years earlier. Just you know who they are, the Reiners and Zells and Ormondys and, the guys who could really make or break an orchestra and who whipped orchestral playing up to the fabulous standard that we currently enjoy. He was one of those, but he was French, thoroughly French, like Pierre Monteux and Charles Munch, who was kind of half French and half German, and those guys. And oh my, he was marvelous, absolutely marvelous. And his recorded legacy consists almost entirely of recordings that he made with the Detroit Symphony. During his decade there, he was in Detroit from 1953 to 1962. And he made a series of fantastic recordings for Mercury Living Presence, some in mono, some in stereo. And now they have all been released in 2 boxes, both of which we're covering. But for this preview of his 10 best recordings, we're going to talk about box number 1. And the 10 Best Recordings video is for ClassicsToday.com subscribers only. You can watch it over on ClassicsToday.com. And if you are not a subscriber, please do consider looking at our fabulously bargain, thrifty, terrific offers for subscriptions, which you can find the link down below this video. But in the meantime, let's talk about Maestro Paray. What is particularly interesting about him is that he was not just a conductor, he was a composer. And what most people don't realize is that he was quite a good one. He really was. He wrote a couple of symphonies. He wrote a beautiful mass to commemorate the 500th anniversary of the death of Joan of Arc. He really wrote some lovely, lovely music. And it deserves to be performed, actually, probably more than a lot of other soi-disant, since we're doing French, soi-disant composers/conductors. But he conducted with a composer's ear. He really did. And he made a wonderful distinction, which we will hear in this box, between the French and the Germanic repertoires. I mean, in the French repertoire, he is swift, crystal clear, with a very keen ear for instrumental color. And in the German repertoire, he really understands the necessity of textural clarity, contrapuntal clarity, the importance of bass lines. I mean, the guy was really good. He had the composer's ear for the music he was conducting, whatever it happened to be. And you can hear that in his recordings very, very, very clearly. So these 2 boxes contain 20 some odd CDs each. He made about 45 or 46 discs, something like that, for Mercury Living Presence, and they are all contained in these 2 boxes. This is volume 1, which goes from 1953 to 1957, and the reason it's interesting is because it contains all of the mono recordings. Now, there was one of the folks, I think, asked me if you have all the Mercury Living Presence cubes, that is, those 3 big cubes of all the Mercury Living Presence recordings. Well, it wasn't all of them, because it wasn't all the mono ones, but most of them. Does it make sense to actually repurchase that for these? Well, first of all, the sound isn't that much different, but there are 12 discs of mono material here, most of which are not in those Mercury Living Presence boxes. So if you're a hardcore collector, you would want to consider it. But for most people who have those 3 giant cubes, with all of the stereo stuff, you really don't need to duplicate. I have to say that straight off. And also, there's another point that's worth making, and it's an economic one. These are beautiful sets. I mean, they're nicely packaged. They're in sane boxes that open like this instead of you pick them up and the bottom falls out and you break your toe and everything goes flying all over the place. They have beautiful booklets with really good notes. I mean, they're class acts all the way. I want to stress that. However, there's always a however. They are original jacket productions with original content. And that means some of these discs are terribly short. I mean, half an hour or less. we're talking. And this material could have been repackaged so that the 12 mono discs actually all fit on 6 very, very easily, maybe 5, maybe even less. The reason they do that, of course, is because they can charge more per disc. And I don't deny anyone's right to try and make money for stuff that they own proprietarily. And collectors who want it are going to pay for it. That's just the way it works. So I don't think it's robbery. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just need to make the point because people have to be cognizant of the fact that they're going to be getting the same material, a lot of it, but decompacted. Because Wilma Cozart Fine, who was, the producer of a lot of those Mercury Living Presence recordings, or all of them actually. I mean, it was her label along with her husband, Bob Fine. She was so proud of the fact that when she put these recordings on CD, she could make hugely thrifty, sensible couplings and really use up the playing limit of the CDs. I mean, she got a disc. I remember her telling me she was so happy that she was able to couple Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony with the Franck Symphony in D minor in Paray's recordings. I mean, an 80-minute long CD. I was really pushing up against the very limits of what a compact disc could do. And she thought it was such a great deal. She wanted to give people a bargain. And that philosophy behind the original Mercury Living Presence reissues has nothing to do with these. All of those carefully considered CD couplings have been decoupled in these boxes. And so you just have to be aware of that. I personally, like I said, I don't think it's evil. I think it's a philosophy. I think they have a right to make money. And God knows Australian Eloquence, which produces these sets, is doing extraordinary work. They really are. So I don't deny them their nickel at all. I truly don't. But I want you to be aware of that as a consumer so that you can make a sensible decision. Now, let us get to the contents of box number 1, which contains 23 CDs, all of which could have probably could have fit on about half as many. But okay, it's all right. You ready? Are you ready? Now, the other thing about the monos, by the way, the first dozen CDs, is that a lot of the repertoire is duplicated later in stereo. And so, again, unless you are a serious hardcore collector, you are probably not going to need to get, all of this stuff just for those few mono recordings. But they are very good mono recordings. On the other hand, collectors will definitely want them, and I'm very happy to have them. So it's your call. It's really your call. So let's talk. Disc number 1, Bolero. He started with Bolero. He always did a very fast Bolero. He brings it in just under 13 minutes. His remake in stereo is just a little over 13 minutes. It's very, very similar. And it's exciting. I mean, you wouldn't think Bolero could be exciting, but it is. Paray had that, he did not dawdle over anything. He really didn't. It's kind of wonderful. And it's coupled with the Rimsky-Korsakov Capriccio Espagnol. So here we go. I mean, these are first CD releases, a lot of these things. And, or at least on Mercury Living Presence, or which is now Eloquence, which used to be Philips, which is now Decca. And they just say Mercury Living Presence. Thank you. That's what it is. But the whole disc is 27 minutes and 24 seconds. So, see what I mean? But the performances are just lovely. The Detroit Symphony was never one of the world's great orchestras. It wasn't. But it's always interesting, and sometimes even more interesting, to hear what a conductor can do with a second tier ensemble and make it just play its heart out and sound fabulous. And that's what Paray does. And I will say also that the Mercury engineering, whether mono or stereo, is always beautiful, perfectly balanced, clear, listenable, enjoyable, even if the tapes are getting old and, there's a little bit of print through here and there, and every so often you hear some hiss or background noise. It makes no difference. The basic sonic values were always top-notch. And so they remain in these remasterings, which have been excellently done. I mean, they put real love and care into this, so I can't fault them for that either. And so that's disc 1. Disc 2 is a Wagner disc. Let me ask you something. Why are, Why are French conductors always the best at Wagner? It's a very interesting question, really, isn't it? I mean, think of Andre Cluitins or some of these other people. They just did wonderful Wagner. And, Ned Rorem famously said that Wagner was really French. And I think he was right. Wagner's aesthetic comes from that of French grand opera. And the best French grand opera composers like Meyerbeer, I mean, they were German. So, there's some cross fertilization. But boy, is Paray a great Wagner conductor because he plays it like real theater. It's exciting. It's dramatic. It's colorful. It's not faux solemnity. It's not a philosophical treatise. It's just red-blooded, living, wonderful, dramatic music. And that's the way he does it. So this first disc has the preludes to Acts 1 and 3 of Lohengrin, the prelude to Meistersinger. What a grand performance this is. But at the same time, it has that clarity, that density that, Wagner's Meistersinger Overture has to have. It's wonderful. The Tannhäuser Overture and the Ride of the Valkyries. That's the first Wagner one. Next, we get Beethoven Seventh. This is really a terrific Beethoven Seventh. It has, like I said, in German music, I mean, he gets the bass lines. He really does. It's wonderful. And the allegretto, oh my goodness, it's such a perfectly judged tempo. And he doesn't make the pianissimos so quiet that you can't hear them. There's no artifice in his conducting, just clarity and natural expression. And that makes this Beethoven Seventh, I think, well worth hearing. It's quite splendid. It really is. And it really gets more exciting as it goes. The first movement is actually rather measured in tempo. The finale is a tornado. It's just terrific. Then we've got the Franck D minor, which he remade later in stereo, and it's very good no matter how you slice it. And Rimsky-Korsakov, the Russian Easter Overture, and the Antar Symphony. These were not remade, and those are really fun to have. They're delightful works. I mean, if you don't know Antar, Rimsky-Korsakov's Second Symphony, sort of, kind of, he was unsure. It's like a baby Scheherazade. It's exotic and luscious with great tunes. And okay, the second movement's a little, formally dysfunctional with rather primitive counterpoint, but hey, who's complaining? Really, who's complaining? And then we get more Ravel, La Valse, the Forêt Pavane, and excerpts from Franck's Psyché, which is, again, not all stuff that he remade. He did all the Ravel stuff all over again, but the other things, not so much. Dukas, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, the mono one. Fauré's Pélias et Mélisande, incidental music. And Roussel's The Spider's Feast. I mean, it's interesting repertoire. And then there's a version of the Sorcerer's Apprentice with narration. Ooh, for kids. It's the kids' version, which I generally pass over. I think kids can take the standard version just as well, or just watch it on Fantasia. I think the visuals do even better than the narration, but it's kind of fun to have. Next, Schumann Symphony Number 4. What a slam-bang Schumann Fourth this is. Exciting as all hell. And I will say, I think the remastering here sounds better than it did in the Mercury Living Presence Complete Schumann cycle that they issued with him. The earlier version. It sounds really, really vivid and trenchant. So that's wonderful. List Les Préludes on that disc. And then there's another Wagner disc, the Flying Dutchman Overture, Parsifal, Tristan and Isolde, and Siegfried's Forest Murmurs, the Prelude and Liebestod, that is. And it's not fast and zippy. It's not, shallow. It's 15 minutes long. It's as heavenly and transmogrified and, Schopenhauerian as anybody's, but awfully, wonderfully clear and limpid, beautiful. And I have to say, nobody did the Flying Dutchman Overture better than Paray. I make the dogmatic statement, whether in mono, as here, or in stereo. Nobody did it better. And if you are a ClassicsToday.com subscriber, you can hear some sound samples of some of these things too. So you can see what I'm talking about or hear what I'm talking about. Boy, did he just nail the Flying Dutchman Overture. It's so exciting. And that's what I mean by this sort of, the French approach to Wagner. It just has so much blood in its veins. It's marvelous. And they're not intimidated by it the way the Germans often are. They treat it a little gingerly sometimes. It's Wagner. The great Wagner, No, they just go for it. And it's wonderful. So that's that. Then we have Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, a very quick, my oh my, period instrument. People take note. The opening movement without the exposition repeat is 7 minutes and 49 seconds. Whoa! And he gets through the scene by the brook in just a little over 10 minutes. I loved his performance. It has such freshness. It's really kind of amazing when you think about it. Metronome marks and all that. I mean, I don't think the metronome marks mattered at all. I think this is just the way he felt it. And wow, it is an absolute splash of cold water on your face. Believe me, it's marvelous. Then we've got Espana, which he redid, of course, and the Ravel Rhapsody Espagnole, which he redid, and Iberia's Escale, all of which he remade, and wonderfully. And finally, disc 12, you get Brahms Four. This ends the mono stuff. Brahms Four is also really, really fine performance. The opening of the finale will absolutely have you jumping out of your seat. It's wonderful the way he handled attacks. I mean, even with the Detroit Symphony, which, people would say was not the greatest orchestra in the world. I mean, it's like, bang! They come in complete, total unison at volume. It's the most exciting opening of the finale I've ever heard in my life. It's really, really cool. Then we've got Bizet, his Carmen Suites and Carmen Suites, excerpts from Suites 1 and 2, and L'Arlésienne, Suites 1 and 2, and then the new Ravel, the next Bolero, and the Mother Goose Suite, and some Chabrier, Boré Fantasque, and the Roussel Suite in F, which is just wonderful, and Henri Barrault, who plays him anymore. He lived from 1900 to 1997. You think he probably wrote something else in the meantime? This is the Offrande à une ombre, the offering to a shadow. Wonderful nocturnal work. And then we've got Debussy, La Mer, and Iberia. Classic performances. Swift, delightful, watery, French-sounding, exciting, great. And the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony on disc 16. That's one of the great ones. It really is. It's wonderful with Marcel Dupré playing the organ. And Paray was also an organist. It's one of those performances where the Mercury engineers really get it right. And this piece depends so much on the engineers doing that. And so often they simply do not. So that was wonderful. And the Chausson Symphony. Well, this is lovely to have. It's a wonderful performance. The Chausson Symphony is one of those, he died in a bicycle accident. Actually, he wasn't that old. He was like 42 or something. 1855 to 1899, 44, I guess. Well, and he fell off a bike. And that was that. But he wrote one symphony. That's it. It's obviously based on the Franck Symphony in D minor, but it has its own sort of more heart-on-sleeve passion to it, I think, and a little bit. It's a little bit more like in your face, energetic. It's a wonderful work. Absolutely first-rate piece of music. Doesn't get played that often. Doesn't get recorded that often. The Charles Munch recording from about this, around the same time as this is usually the one that people turn to as the référence, and with good reason. It's a wonderful performance, but it's not better than this. The orchestra is a little better. Okay, granted. This one is maybe even a little more exciting. It's a little quicker. And it's just a wonderful performance of a work that is insufficiently well known. So that I'm delighted that it's here. And then we've got the Rachmaninoff Symphony No. 2, the one that was the coupling to the Franck D minor, because he gets through the Franck D minor in about 35 minutes. And this Rachmaninoff, which has, the standard cuts, is 45 minutes. So there you go. I love hearing Paray doing all of this not French repertoire and doing it with that same feeling for clarity and shape and line and elegance. The guy was a class act. It's that simple. Then we've got the other Schumanns. Schumann 2 is here on CD 19 all by itself. And the Schumann cycle was Paray's own favorite thing of anything he did. And I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, it depends on how much you like Schumann, I suppose. Wagner, more Wagner, Götterdämmerung, Prologue, Dawn and Siegfried's Rhine Journey, concert version. Only 8 minutes and 34 seconds to get through that. The Siegfried Idyll, one of the better ones, 15 minutes and a bit. The Parsifal Prelude, which is gorgeous. The Tristan and Isolde Prelude to Act 3, all by itself, which is lovely. Someone said in my review of the last Stokowski box that he's one of the few people who ever did the Tristan Prelude to Act 3. Wrong. Here's the other one. There you go. Because no one ever did it, they said, something like that. Well, no, other people did it. Then we've got the Paray Mass, which is just a beautiful work with a tune in the finale, the Agnus Dei. Da 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 da. No, you do it. Da 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 da. It is so French. It is so beautifully French. It's so wonderfully French. Oh, I love it. Beautiful work. There's a stereo recording on reference recordings. It's quite fine too. But this is the authentic thing with the real deal. And then he thanks everybody afterwards in really fantastically heavily accented English. It's quite wonderful. And you get that. You get his word of thanks after the sessions. Then there's Mozart, the Hofner and Haydn 96. It makes you wish we heard him do more classical period stuff because he was really of that mode. He was like Zell was with the classical period. He just got it. The clarity, the crispness, the shaping, it was just right for him. The neatness, the ability to be exciting and push the orchestra and really make everybody play while keeping everything in proportion. He just understood it. His own music is like that. So you can see that, it was a perfect exponent of that kind of music. Then we've got the Reddish Symphony. He does diddle the orchestration a little bit in Schumann, which I think is just fine to, make the contrapuntal lines come out a little more clearly and prune out some of the thickets of woodwind doublings and make the texture a little bit lighter. It works very, very well. He's very sensitive about it. And is that it? Was that it? Oh my God, the Schumann. Yeah, it's the last one. That's it for box number 1. Well, it's a very good box. I'm very, very happy to have this material in this particular form. I think it's just terrific. I'm thrilled that it's available. I thank Australian Eloquence, but you as the listener have to make a real decision whether you think it's worth it to have the mono stuff. I'm not going to judge that for you. I don't think that's my place to say. I let you know what's in here, and you can make up your own decision, look at the price, and see if it's worth your while. We will be doing box number 2. I just want you to know that. So if you're watching this in the year 5785, we already have done box number 2. But we'll do it very shortly, I promise you, so that we can talk about the complete set. But like I said, everything in box number 2 has already been released in those living presence things. So it's not as important, I think, as box number 1. And for the 10 best Paray recordings, once again, if you are an insider subscriber on ClassicsToday.com, please just hie on over there and take a look at the video on his 10 best recordings with samples. And thank you so much for joining me. Keep on listening and take care.